Hi, everybody. That's one of my favorite intros I've ever had. Nothing pleases like vegan cheeses. Um, well, first of all, I have to ask all of you, I'm hoping to see a lot of hands go up. Who here would identify as socially conscious? Okay, good audience. Although I saw like two people do this one, and I don't know what that means, but it's okay, we'll get you there. So, what I want to call your attention to, you've been hearing some really dynamic speakers today discussing all of the reasons why we need to prioritize the liberation of animals and justice for all beings on this planet, human and non. But if we look back at the history of social justice and progress relating to the equity and equal treatment of all marginalized populations, what we see is common is that real change starts to happen and the biggest momentum starts to occur once at least 10% of the American population has subscribed to it. So 10% is that magical number that we have to reach in order to start to see massive changes in laws, massive changes in business, and massive changes in social behavior. So with that in mind, if we look at veganism as a moral imperative, and I think many of us here do, that means we need to get 10% of the American population to be vegan. Who has an idea of what percentage we're at right now in the United States? 8 or 9 down here? 3? 3, okay, 3. So here's the answer, we actually don't know. And here's why. The reason we don't know is because these studies don't really define what vegan means. And many of these studies are counting vegetarianism in with veganism, or they're also including people who are plant-based and not necessarily vegan. For those of you that are not aware, plant-based refers to the dietary component only, meaning that you avoid consuming animals and their secretions in your diet, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you avoid the exploitation of animals for clothing or experimentation, entertainment, etc., etc. Additionally, the studies that indicate that vegans revert to eating animals. Uh-oh.
I tried the other one.
Yeah, try it again. Oh, this one? Are you serious? I'll go over and bring it to you. Okay. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Kinda? So the studies that tell us that most vegans revert to eating animals are actually very likely studying people who are following a plant-based diet who then jumped onto the paleo bandwagon and the keto bandwagon and every single other dietary trend that comes along. So if we average out the results of all these different studies, we see that we are landing right now somewhere between 2.5 to 6.5% of the American population. That's still a long way from 10%. Now, how are we going to get there? Whether we like it or not, the United States is a very capitalist country. We can get into the discussion on the ethics of capitalism, and that's a very interesting one. But what I invite you to consider is that the majority of new business owners have seen the horrible implications of the destructive elements of capitalism that we've seen over the last 50 years especially, and they're interested in changing that. So I want to invite you to include business in your realm of activism and advocacy. And there's several ways that you can do that. Number one, I'm going to ask that all of you, whether you are vegan or not, to please start asking companies to embrace the term vegan in their labeling. Because guess what? Non-vegans can buy vegan products. Yes, thank you. But we want them to know that what they're buying is vegan and that it's playing into a conscious movement and the raising of consciousness in a community and a society that's based on endless access to information, right? So please push companies to embrace the word vegan in their labeling. That's number one. Number two, I'm going to ask that you participate by buying from these companies when you can, even if the company as a whole is not a vegan company. And here's why. If we look at Dean Foods,
Thank you. Hi. Oh. Just in time. My voice is starting to scratch. It was going to run out on you. So if we look at Dean Foods, one of the largest dairy producers in the country, as soon as silk soy milk started to make its way to grocery store shelves all across America, they started to convert their dairies to production facilities for more plant-based milks. In the space of less than 2 years, they shut down 4 of their dairies and converted them to production facilities for plant-based milks. Yes, I mean, that's huge. And that equals thousands of more of cows who are not suffering in those dairies, and that equals the savings of hundreds of thousands of gallons of fresh water, and the emissions, and the waste management that doesn't exist in animal agriculture. And so that's real progress. And now, if we look at Dean Foods, what's happening is that they are shutting down 7 dairies in the next 12 months. 7 dairies. Now, I do need to disclose to you, not all of those are being converted to production plants for plant-based milks, but they are shutting down. And that is what we want. Okay, we don't want to put people out of work, but that doesn't mean that we need to keep these institutions alive that are enslaving any being on this planet, whether they're human or not. And so since that's what we want, we need to support these companies. When we see companies like Tyson, which is inarguably one of the most evil entities in the world, becoming one of the biggest investors in plant-based alternatives, guess what? We need to buy the plant-based alternatives that they're selling, and we need to be telling them we want to see vegan slapped on that label. Once we see vegan all over grocery store shelves, and I'm talking grocery stores like Key Food, C-Town, ShopRite, not just Whole Foods, not just Trader Joe's. We want them in every grocery store, every gas station, every bodega. Once everyone is seeing vegan everywhere, then when they're approached by someone performing vegan advocacy, and they're asked, have you ever considered going vegan? They're going to know what that person is talking about, and that word will not sound so scary. And don't you think they'll be so much more receptive to considering going vegan if they've been seeing it everywhere on restaurant menus and products on shelves everywhere they go? So that's why I want to really implore all of you, we do need to shift massively the structure of this country when it comes to business and capitalism. But the way that's going to shift is not only from the outside, but from the inside, from those of us who are entrepreneurs seeking to define what a socially conscious business really looks like. And we need your support, and we need to encourage the big, bad conglomerates to also follow that trend. If they don't follow that trend, then you need to let them know. Social media is the best way. Get on Twitter, get on Instagram, get on Facebook. I would argue that Twitter is really best when it comes to business and politics. So if you're not yet on Twitter, get active so that you can let these companies know where you're putting your dollars. So let me see a raise of hands. How many of you might choose to identify now as a conscious consumer in the interest of advocacy? Amazing. Please keep doing the activism that you are performing now. Continue your outreach, continue your protests, continue rescue. I myself continue to participate in these actions. Please stay diverse, but all the while, please keep business in the forefront of your mind so that we can really get America past that tipping point of 10% of the population, because then it's only a matter of time before we're at that 100% where we know we need to be. Thank you.